You're listening to the Fezcast, the Saracens fans podcast, bringing you the independent and unhinged views of the voices in our heads, as well as those of our special guests. To get in touch with us, find the Fezcast on social media and listen to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube and more. Thanks for tuning in and enjoy this week's show.
You're listening to the Fezcast.
Oh, let me be your teddy bear. I don't want to be anything else but your teddy bear. And that's from Matt, because apparently I'm a teddy bear after last week's Omni Shambles, Duncan. He said my bite, John, is not as bad as my bark or whatever. But I'm going to point out the story of the 7 Ps, which is proper preparation and planning prevents piss poor performance, or as one of my sporting heroes, Grand Goose, used to say, fail to prepare, prepare to fail. So this week, everything's nicely written out. We have an agenda and we can follow it through, can't we, gentlemen?
Well, it's not as exciting as last week, though, is it?
Right, fly by the seat of your pants. Well, yeah, joining us tonight is Duncan and Jon. Me and Duncan are going to have a chat in part 2 about the women, which we're going to record after part 3. But part 3 is going to be we're going to talk about the men's game on the weekend, which Duncan was at, obviously, and Jon, you and me saw it. I presume you got Amazon Prime, have you, or Premier, or whatever it's on. Yeah. I managed to get it off of a dodgy South African feed that James put the link out there too. But yeah, so that's what today's show's all about and everything. In our last one before Christmas, and we'll talk about what's happening over Christmas week. But shall we play in our normal advert here, Duncan, and then we'll talk about part 2. But actually, what we're going to do is talk about part 3. Don't worry, it'll make itself. We're just making difficulties for Matt to get him back to be on the edit next week.
And you call this prepared, do you?
Yes, or.
You're listening to the Fezcast.
Hi, Alex Osterbury here, Director of Rugby for Saracens Women. You're listening to the Saracens Fezcast.
This is the Fezcast.
Well, welcome to part 2 of the Fezcast. And it's just me and Duncan for this part, because we're going to talk about the women's game, which Jon never saw. So apparently he was watching the darts on Saturday and European, but, you know, that's the way it goes. But, yeah, women went down to Gloucester. Let's be honest about it. Gloucester Hartbury. What a squad they've got. I mean, it's easy to see why they're double champions, Duncan, in it. I mean, it was always going to be a hard job versus a pack in particular, the likes of Matthews, Oldcroft, etc. in it. I mean, Gloucester Hartbury, money well spent, I think.
Yeah, I've got to be honest, I haven't seen the game either because I was busy trying to corral my grandsons and not lose one of them. But I spoke to a couple of people who did go down to Gloucester and they said while we put up a good fight, there was really only ever going to be one winner out of that game.
Yeah, I mean, they are such a strong squad. And I think it's being double champions breeds that, you know, we know from Saracens, both men and women, that when you get that momentum, when you get that aura of being champions, and let's be honest about it, Gloucester Hartbury have got 5 points on the board against most teams before they even step out onto the pitch, haven't they?
Yeah, I mean, they've been up and down this season, but they're definitely coming into their stride and looking very, very impressive by all accounts.
Yeah, they are indeed. I mean, but let's look on the bright side. Let's go glass half full. It is Christmas after all. There are a couple of presents in there. And I think scoring 31 points against a very good Gloucester team, getting the try bonus point, that could be so vital in this constrained season, couldn't it? Any bonus points you can pick up. You know, you go away from home. You don't expect to win games against top 4 sides away from home. And that'll be the same for Gloucester coming to Saracens or Bristol coming to Saracens, which we'll talk about in a minute, or Exeter or whatever. You know, and us going away, if you get a win away from home, it's kind of like a bonus, isn't it? And, you know, so you go for the next best thing, which is to come away with something. And Saracens came away with something. And that can only be good, can't it?
Yeah, I think that bonus point could be very important. Quins are on have played 9, got 35 points, and to get into second place, that means now we're 3 points behind them. So we could do it if they lose a game and we get a win, and we are 2 points ahead of Bristol, who've played one game less. So it really brings this weekend into focus, doesn't it? We've really got to win this weekend.
Well, yeah, I think we do, and then continue that momentum going for the remainder of the season. A win against Bears is going to be so huge, isn't it? I mean, and we talk about winning away from home. Of course, they went down to Bears and won away from home this season. You want to back that up and do the double over them. And as I say, at that point, then potentially you could be seeing a split between the top 4 and the rest of the league, and that's really got to be ideal, because then it kind of takes the pressure off. Because I'm not saying you're going to have guaranteed top 4, because you could have a complete and utter disastrous 2 or 3 games and be back in it. But if that pressure's off, that you know your favourites are top 4 as opposed to guaranteed, it makes things a little bit easier, doesn't it? I think perhaps
it does. I still think the pressure's on to get top 2, though. I mean, it could be interesting to see whether Quins stay in the position they're in second place. But normally you think, going away in a semi-final against Exeter or Gloucester, that is going to be really tough. Whereas a home game is another matter.
Yeah, I absolutely. I think that will be the focus from the coaching team and the players, that they really do need now to back up and put a statement down on the weekend against the Bears and use that as the springboard for the rest of the season. And we know Saracens clubs, sides, women and men, their past masters are getting just in the right place. But if they're not in the right place, they won't panic.
No, that's right. It's really weird, isn't it, to think, as you say, we're nearly at Christmas, and the regular league ends. Was it end at the end of February or beginning of March? We're nearly there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, plenty to look forward to on that. And I mean, we did pretty well, seeing as I only watched the highlights and you're taking second-hand information there, Duncan. But, Bears at home on the weekend, if you can get down to Stonex to support the girls, I would do so. I think it'd be an ideal early Christmas present for somebody. Plus, you could get in a club shop and get somebody a new shirt or something for Christmas, obviously. So do get yourself along there if you can, and support the women. And we'll be back after the break with Jon to have a chat about a great win away in Paris for Saracens men.
You're listening to the Fezcast.
You are listening to the Fezcast, which is proudly sponsored by the Saracen Supporters Association, and I'm Alison Davis, one of the SSA committee. For a £10 annual subscription, the SSA provides our members with monthly newsletters, virtual and in-person player events, away match ticket allocations, and we organise pre-match gatherings at away matches. We sponsor men's and women's players, and we support the Saracens Foundation Track Club on behalf of our members. On top of all that, every year we have a seasonal SSA badge, which is exclusive to members. Where else can you get that much value for a tenner? Join now at membermojo.co.uk/SSA, or come and see us on match day in the Oasis at the Stonex.
This is the Fezcast.
Well, as we said at the top of the show, part 3, which we're going to do now, is all about the game on the weekend in Paris. And luckily, unlike Bonnie Tyler, Duncan's not lost in France. He managed to make it back on the old Eurostar. Couple of bottles of Saint Emilion in the luggage, I expect, Duncan?
No, they've already been drunk. No, it was a long old day. And we did get lost, as it happens. We ended up thinking we were going back to the Gardinor and ended up in Montmartre, which is a lot higher and a lot more steps. But anyway, it was good for us. No, it was a brilliant day, really brilliant day. Up at 5 o'clock to get an 8 o'clock Eurostar. Great meeting point just next to the stadium, where I think nearly all the 300 people who travelled. The stadium itself, I've got to say, is absolutely superb. You probably saw on the TV that what was there, 5,000 or 6,000 people maybe in a 28,000 capacity stadium, but they designed it in a way, it was kind of like a boombox. The noise, it sort of amplified the noise, including of all the flag waving Sarries fans who were there, who put up a really good show, I think.
Yeah, that came over on the dodgy South African link I was watching it on. And John, presumably you were watching it on Premier Sports, where it came over to you quite loudly.
Yeah, it really did. It was really noticeable, actually, that the Saracens fans made a load of racket, and obviously we had the guys who were there had a lot to cheer about, thankfully. So yeah, no, it really did. It was it's definitely worth pointing out the fact that the Sarries travelled well, and as you say, it did come across. Yeah,
yeah. I mean, it certainly did, and I mean, I think the French supporters made their voices heard as well on occasions, but primarily when their team were on the wrong end of Ollie Davidson, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on when we talk about the game. First things first, the feed I got, obviously, commentary included our good friends, I say tongue-in-cheek, Mr. Good, Andy of this parish. Although I did agree with him on a couple of occasions, but there were a couple of things I wanted to pick up from the commentary that he talked about. First up was the fact that a certain Mr. Farrell was in the crowd with one of Saracens' directors. Well, of course he was. He wasn't playing that game that weekend. He's out injured. His mates were in town. Of course, he went and watched it. And I mean, I think they were making a bit much of the fact he was there. And perhaps he's not having the best of time at Racing. But I mean, you know, people are putting two and two together and coming up with 74, aren't they, Duncan?
I would imagine so. Yeah, as you say, why on earth would he not be there? He lives just down the road, presumably, and as you say, his mates are there. The team that he's supported since he was knee high to a grasshopper, so of course he was there.
Yeah, and the other thing that Andy Good came out with was he was talking about Fergus Burke at 10 and saying that Saracens players are much happier with the way that Fergus Burke making the insinuation that Saracens players were unhappy when Owen Farrell was playing at 10, which is absolute BS, isn't it, John?
I think that just shows how fragile of a person Andy Good is. He obviously wouldn't have got in the team if him and Owen Farrell were in the same place at the same time, and I don't think he'd have been able to handle the fact that Faz would have been on his case because he weren't all that good.
Well, yeah.
The bloke's an idiot, mate. When I see last week against the Bulls, I watched it back after I got home, and Alex Good was on the commentary. But when I see A Good on the commentary again, I had high hopes, but unfortunately we got that instead, didn't we?
I've stopped listening to that podcast he does with Jim Hamilton. You know, if Jim Hamilton does something on his own, I'll give it a listen. But he really is, you know.
Indeed. Well, look, I mean, the one thing you can say about him, he is like a broken watch. And on occasion, he does get things right, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But the game itself, I mean, it hinged on one moment, didn't it? Let's be honest about it. And the first 10 minutes, I mean, it looked like being a hard afternoon. Stad come out of the blocks and really put us under an awful lot of pressure up until Makalou had, I mean, people saying generously a brain fart. I think it was an act of thuggery with a cheap shot. And, you know, you see it in games, you know, and in my playing day, I wasn't averse to the odd cheap shot, I will have to say, but I didn't have 15 cameras on me and, you know, every little bit of your play being analysed, as it were. The trip was bad enough. That was deserving of a penalty and a yellow. But the swinging arm into the player on the floor straight after, I mean, it's just buggery, and he needs a long ban to think about it, doesn't he, John?
I honestly don't know what was going through his mind. It's not like it was a desperate, you know, we're 5 metres out and it's that or we're going to score. Mind you, even if that is the case, why would you do it? It just seemed it's just a brain fade of a huge proportion. He's one of them players, Makalou. You think as a youngster he could have a really bright international future that lasts a long time, and it's things like that. And to be fair, it's their whole squad. That's their third red card, is it, in 2 games so far in the Champions Cup? It's not great. It's not a good look for him, for the club, and for the league. And the other thing, when we're talking about the host broadcaster, that was the worst thing about the whole thing for me. They begrudgingly showed a replay of that, knowing they had no choice. There was a blatant neck roll on Alec Cleary just before they scored their second try towards the end of the game that they didn't show one replay of, and that seemed to happen constantly through the game. They scored that second try. I said to my missus, she was sat next to me, I said, that'll be disallowed. There's a blatant neck roll there. They go back, show the replay. It starts from the phase after that happened, they then score from. And they didn't show it. And I'm like, oh, word. this is so biased, it's so blatant as well. But yeah, they had no choice but to show that one. Ivan Van Zel's face hanging off the bone, and yeah, unfortunately for McAloo, he's an idiot. He's tucked his team right up there.
Well, indeed, and that does bring in the fact that I thought the game was actually really well refereed by Holly Davidson, Duncan. I think she was clear, concise, and her instructions, at least by Saracens, were understood. Whether the French lost something in translation, I don't know. I don't think that is right. Most of them speak English. There was enough English speakers in their team to understand what she was asking. But I think she did really, really well in quite trying circumstances. And I mean, it did come over that every time a decision needed to be made against the French, the wolf whistling, the booing, the volume increased hugely, didn't it, Duncan?
Well, that's France. That's par for the course. As John quite correctly says, the French television directors showing over again any slight infringement by the non-French team and never showing anything by the French team. You don't know, 1 second, I'll get rid of this. You never know if they were so wound up to start with, because they did come out the blocks like a steam train, didn't they? And it would have, it's a shame in a way you can't go back and see what the result would have been had he not been sent off. But it changed the game beyond recognition. Right at the end, when they were 14 against 15, they were still coming back at us and they were still dangerous, weren't they? So,
Yeah, it was.
I think it had a huge impact on the result.
I mean, but going back to their indiscipline as well, I mean, the only blemish on Holly's card I felt was the fact that she let one go. Halifaro's hit on Rotimi Shegan is where I agree with Andy Good. I mean, he made the point that Shegan might have changed his direction, but it was 4 paces before he actually hit the contact. And that was a clear shoulder to head and should have been a red card. But likewise, Rhys Carey got away with one, didn't he? Because the handoff where he fought, and he knew what he was doing there. I mean, looked like it was a handoff, but he followed through with the elbow. That could easily have been a red and could easily be cited. I'm not sure whether it can be cited now after the fact, but I think perhaps she refereed it with a mind on the game, the performance, the match, and those were both punished. Whether they were enough or not is a different matter. But I thought she did well there, John.
Yeah, she did. I think she was right with the Rhys Carey one, to be honest. It was just really frustrating because we built up some phases, made some ground, and it looked like we was in a dangerous position. And then he goes and does that. And you think, it was just a shame that, that could have led to a fourth try, a 5th point, who knows? And obviously the one with Ben Earl where it bounces up twice and hits him on the arm was unlucky. But yeah, I think it was fair. I think she had a good game for the most part, although I don't agree with the scrum penalty they scored there to make it 10-0 from. I think Riccione had their loose head pretty. I think it was our penalty. If you watch it again, you see it from that side. He goes down first. Riccioni's nice and straight. I don't know where she got that one from, but she did have a good game on the whole, I think, yeah.
I think
it's impossible for a referee to get everything right, isn't it? And all you can ask, I think, is it's for them to get 90% right, and she definitely did that. And I think
also to give penalties for the same offence, which she did consistently. She obviously saw it differently to other people. She's got the whistle in her hand, but she saw every single situation that went that way exactly the same and penalised accordingly. That's all you can ask for. It's consistency, isn't it, Duncan?
Yeah, and also I think for any referee, there must be it must take a huge amount of pressure with or without a French crowd on your back to give 2 red cards in a match. It's a very, very psychologically difficult thing to do for them, I think.
Yeah. Now, moving on to the performance, though, and who stood out. And, I mean, first off, I'm going to sound like a bit of a broken record here, but Tom Willis stood out again. Now, to be fair, it's pretty easy to predict what he's going to do. You kick off to him, and the French kicked off to him every time, and he's just going to run that ball back like an absolute steam train. And, do you know what he's going to do? Knowing what he's going to do and stopping him doing it, though, are 2 completely different things, aren't they?
They definitely are. You're absolutely right. Once again, and against a big French team, as French teams tend to be, he's still powering through. finding it difficult to stop. There were a couple of times, it's quite funny, when he looked around thinking, oh, shall I try an offload? No, I won't.
Yeah.
Head down and straight on as usual, but he's so good at it.
Indeed. And staying in the pack, John, for you, I mean, I want to talk about what I'm now calling the wrecking crew in the engine room, which is 4, 5, and 6, Maro, Nick, and Theo. They were, well, omnipresent. I mean, they're 3 big boys, big tough boys. I mean, there's a couple of times Maro got lifted in tackles and everything, but I think that was purely because of him looking to be more open in his play and looking for offloads and everything. But, you know, they just bossed the pack around the place, didn't they? And I mean, it's sad to see Nick Ezekwe get hurt towards the end of the game, and hopefully he's okay. A bit of a headache for Christmas, I think. But, I mean, they bossed it big style, didn't they?
The thing that I love about those 3 is that physically they're pretty similar, but the way they play, all 3 of them is very, very different. Like Nick Ezekwe, for me, our miracle man coming back after all the medical trouble he's had, he's nothing short of a marvel. I love him. He's such a good player. He's so underrated, so underused by England, in my opinion. But he is like he's taken on that mantle of tackle machine and he's running with it. Maro is the leader, the captain. He's pretty talismanic. And then Theo McFarland is basically a basketball player playing rugby. When he gets hold of the ball one-handed and just legs it, I love watching him play. He's so good. He's so different to, you know, even you get some teams will obviously play a 6 of that size as an extra line-out option and stuff, but none of them could do what he does. None of them. And that whole pack there, you've got Ben Earls, obviously turned into a world-class operator. Tom Willis, who I think he dips himself in Vaseline before he plays, because that's the only explanation for how a man that big can find small holes constantly. But yeah, them 3 you mentioned, unbelievable performance again. I just hope that Nick's okay, because that didn't look very good at all, did it?
No, but I mean, obviously, you know, hopefully Hugh Tizard can come back in as well, who does a similar job as well. So, you know, wait and see. Moving back out of the pack, though, I thought it was good to see some real good control at halfbacks. Ivan and Fergus really look like they're developing a partnership, Duncan, which wasn't diminished when Gareth came on as well late on in the second half.
No, not at all. Can I just make one point about Hugh Tizard? Apparently his hearing is today, and he's already missed 2 matches, and we're talking on Monday. And I think it'll be a minimum of 4 ban he'll get, personally, because it wasn't good, was it?
No.
So we could be a bit light for the 2 games, especially coming up on Sunday. We might be bit light in the engine room. But going back, yeah, Fergus Burke was really good, and he seems to be growing step by step into the role. I still think in the backs, although there were some really brilliant bits, 2 bits spring to mind. The Fergus Burke break, which eventually led to Elliot Daly with a long pass out to Liam Williams and a really good finish, was superb. There was a little bit of basketball when about 4 or 5 players, including Nick Tompkins, sort of batted it on before Roti got flattened by the player you were talking about. But we still seem at times a bit error-strewn and a little bit lacking in invention in the backs. You know, receiving the ball in a static position. And I thought when Ollie Hartley came on, he gave us something different, because he's more of a sort of Brad Barrett battering ram. And that little bit of difference in the backs, I think, would be a useful addition.
Well, I agree with you. I mean, I'm slightly concerned. I'm thinking now probably the amount of times you've pumped Ollie, and potentially easy grandson, isn't he? I think. But, I mean, there's something there, isn't there? But yeah, I mean, I do agree with you. I think that is something that needs to be developed there. But one thing we can say is the return of Sanjay, Liam Williams. It doesn't look like he's been away. I mean, we know he scores tries on the big occasions, but what I thought he did particularly well was he's reading on some great defensive calls. I mean, there was a couple of movements into the space to cut down past it, you know, and just at the right time. I mean, it's very easy, you know, you see players doing it and going for the intercepts or whatever. He timed it. He understood when to do it. And it was like, you know, when he did that turnover in 2019 in Newcastle, it was that sort of thing that he brought to the game, which was really superb, John.
I think he's exactly what we need. I think that one of the things I would say about a player that he's kind of replaced, Sean Maitland, is defensively he was very underrated, I believe. You very rarely saw anything go askew on his side of the pitch. And Liam Williams is as good, if not better, at that, in my opinion. He's a great reader of the game, as you say. He never gets caught under the ball, passing going over his head and stuff. He's just a very smooth operator, very experienced, obviously. And I hope that this 6-month return turns into 18 months, because I think he'd be the perfect kind of older head to lead the back three once Alex Good's not there next season. I'm really looking forward to seeing Williams and Good on the same pitch again, I must say. But yeah, he played really well. No surprise that he scored. Always in the right spot. Lovely little, twist of the hips, and his bowed legs are away.
Yeah. The obviously downside is with 84 Cats of Wales, there's every chance of Warren Gatland to be on the phone to him fairly soon, I think, for the Six Nations, which could be, one of them things, isn't it? Funny, really, though, talking about going away to France, Duncan, and getting a win, which doesn't happen very often. Our little chat between us had that little black cloud, shall we say, the downside, as to say, the lack of a fourth try, the lack of a bonus point, will that come back to bite us? And I mean, I know John was very much glass half full, so pointing out that a home win with a bonus point against Castra, with potentially, going away to Munster, what you get from Munster. If you've got a losing bonus point or a couple of bonus points there, you're going to say that's going to put you in prime position. But it really is important in this tournament, Duncan, isn't it, to get top four if we're going to have any pretensions of going forward and doing well in the competition.
Well, when you look at Toulouse, what they did to Exeter, and the Leinsters and La Rochelles, it's absolutely essential we get a top, get the home tie side of the draw to stand any chance of even going far into the competition. It's absolutely vital.
Yeah, and I think there's got to be an element of managing fans' expectations here. Looking at some of the 3-word reviews that we've got from Finn en route to Cardiff. Sarri Rich, 4-star incoming, though he did say, or am I getting a bit overexcited? And, Saracens 1971, Alain Lenoir, it was, memorable Saracen success from Rugby Saracens. I think we might be looking at this thinking, yeah, it was a good result, but as you said, I mean, Toulouse put Exeter to the sword without getting out of second gear. They look impressive. Leinster will always look impressive. I think if we get top four, then we've potentially got the game and the players to surprise a few people, but it's a big ask, isn't it, Duncan?
We still need to go up in our level of performance. Yeah, it was a great day, and all you can do is beat what's in front of you. But as I say, we beat a relegation-threatened French team with 14 players. That's what we did.
Yeah.
We did it as well. Did we do it as well as we could? We can push a try over. As I said earlier, I think we still got some game to up in terms of our back play.
Indeed we do. But a win's a win. At the end of the day, in 20 years' time, when we look back at this, will we be wondering how we did it, or will we look at the result and say, oh, going away to France, that's the result. I think we take what we've got. Building into next week, and a quick word, we got Saints before Christmas. Momentum's really important. They got a good win away down in South Africa. They've had a pretty nondescript season in comparison to last season in the Premiership. I mean, them at home, it's really important we get a good win, and hopefully the momentum will take us forward on that one, John.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's important that, last Prem home game was Leicester, I believe, which didn't go so well. So we've got a few more bodies back now. Everyone's a bit more cohesive, a bit together. There's still players who, like Sinti and Gonzalez are still not really hit their straps yet after coming back from Morton Nations, and we're building nicely. I think that's how I would describe Saracens at the moment. I think we need to get a result. We need to solidify our place in the top four in the league, which, if we hadn't have messed up at Newcastle, we'd be a lot more comfortable already. But obviously we're at home. I'm always confident going to the Stonex, and I don't think Northampton will be looking forward to it too much, to be honest.
No, well, hopefully not. Talking about looking forward to things, I mean, we come to the end of the show for this week. To say next Wednesday's Christmas Day. So as much as Duncan was quite happy to put a show out on Christmas Day, I don't think anybody out there in Fezcast land would really want to listen to us droning on when you're opening up your presents and cracking into the Bacardi breezes. So we're going to
Speak for yourself.
but we're going to record a show before Christmas, reviewing what's happened against Saints and previewing Bath game, but it'll go out on Friday, the 27th of December next week. All it remains for me to say is, gentlemen, thank you very much for your time, and thank you everybody for listening in. And as I say, we won't speak to you until after Christmas now. So from the Fezcast, we wish all of our listeners the very happiest of Christmases and a holiday and everything. And as I say, hopefully we'll be talking about a fine win over Saints as a final unwrapping just after Christmas, won't we, Duncan and Jon?
We will.
Fingers crossed, mate. Can I just say before we go, as the curtain comes down on another calendar year at StoneX, I just wanted to say, if I may, to Kevin Lackall in particular at Saracens, and to Charlotte Ryder as well. They done something for Charlie and I this year, which I promise you we'll never forget. And I just want to say thank you to them, to the SSA, to the Pioneers, to everyone who has anything to do with Saracens Rugby Club. We love you so much. Thank you.
Absolutely, 100%, and completely and utterly agree with those sentiments, Jon. And Merry Christmas to all of those guys as well. And Merry Christmas to everybody out there. And we'll speak to you next week.
This is the Fezcast.